Official. The moderator is Dr. Gauri Murthy, and we have Dr. Paraj Dave, Dr. Ankur Sinha, Dr. N.R. Rangaraj, and Dr. J.C. Das as the chairpersons. And the first talk is by Dr. Kumar Ravi. So,
yeah, I welcome all of you.
Dr. Gauri,
and this is
Dr. Gauri, over to you to take over this session, and mute myself.
Yeah. Welcome to all of you. This is a session on visual fields and OCT. So the first speaker will be Dr. Kumar Ravi on visual fields. Please go ahead, sir. Please go ahead, Dr. Ravi.
Yeah, I'm sharing my screen. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, AOS, Dr. Amit in particular, for having me in this program. My topic is visual fields. I hope my slide is visible.
Yes, sir, it is visible. You can go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So this is the view that we have with both our eyes. And this is the area that we usually see with our single eye. And when we put it on 2 dimension with the help of this machine, this is a kind of report that we get, the perimeter report. Now, there are different machines available in market with which we can get perimeter report, and different machines use different statistical formulae. So the report of one machine may not be directly comparable with the other machine. In an ideal situation, when we are having or reading a perimeter report, we should have the patient or a disk photo in front of us so that we can compare the changes in the disk with the findings that we have in the report. I would like to state this with the example. If we see this fundus photo here, we would appreciate that there is an RNFL defect in the superior part and in the inferior part. But when we see the report, we see that there is only a superior arcuate scotoma, and as expected, there should be an inferior arcuate scotoma, but which is missing here. This kind of misses may be there in pre-perimetric glaucomas. So this re-emphasizes that glaucoma is a clinical diagnosis, and any even best of the reports is only for supportive evidence, or it may help us in confirming the diagnosis or help us in prognosticating the disease or telling us how the disease is progressing with time. When we have a report in front of us, we can divide it roughly into 8 parts. Like the first part would be the patient data. The second part is reliability indices. The third part is the threshold values, the actual values of the patient and how the patient is performing based on what values every point on the retina gets. And the same is converted to the grayscale value. And this we use for teaching the patients regarding how severe the disease is. In fifth part, we are showing the total deviation plot in which the patient's data is compared with the age-matched normal to show if there is any generalized depression of vision, suppose say in cataract or in refractive errors. In the sixth one, we have pattern deviation plot. In pattern deviation plot, we would know if there are any localized areas of defect, especially in glaucomas. GHT gives us, in this, the computer gives us an idea if the field report which has come, it shows glaucomatous changes. And in global indices, the machine summarizes into a single value the entire sum total of whatever the data we have got to say whether the performance is like normal or it is subnormal. Like we will get an idea with a single value, numerical value. Now coming to the basics of HVF, normally we go for a 30- or a 24-2 program. In 30-2 program, normally we evaluate the 30-degree field of the patient with the help of the points evaluation of the retina. Around 76 points are evaluated. In 24-2, the outer points are left out, and the outer rim is left out, and rest all the points are similar. So for 24-2 and 30-2 reports, most of the points are similar in assessment. So we can compare these 2 reports. These 2 reports are comparable. For evaluation of a glaucoma patient, I would normally order a 24-2, and if a report is like this, it should suffice. But in case of advanced glaucoma, if the involvement of the central 4 points, if any of these 4 points is completely black, that means it is an advanced stage glaucoma. I would order, in addition to 24-2, additionally a 10-2 program also. And if we want a better assessment of macular region, we can go for a macular threshold program. But whenever we are ordering some unusual programs like macular threshold, we should be aware that the system will not do the statistical analysis which it does in case of 24-2 or 30-2. Like we do not get the total deviation or pattern deviation plot when we're doing these programs. Here we just get raw data and we have to make our own assessments. Just to re-emphasize, in 30-2, we are evaluating these many points, but in 10-2, this 10-degree visual field is analyzed in great detail. Similarly, in the macular programs, this still central part is also analyzed in finer detail. So the macular and the 10-2 programs, the report cannot be directly compared because the points analyzed are different with 30-2 or 24-2 programs. Now, normally for the assessment, the target size is 3. And in case the patient has any macular problem, then we can use size 5 program. But again, we have to remember that the moment we use size 5 program, we get only the raw data and it may not be directly, like we do not get the statistical analysis by the system here. Now, whether we should do patients' perimetry in dilated or non-dilated state, I usually, for some reasons, prefer dilated. But we can take any standard, either undilated natural stage or dilated stage, and follow up the patient subsequently with the same state. In this perimetry, the patient had a constricted pupil because of treatment, and we see a defect which is similar to something like a rim artifact. But when the patient was dilated, that this artifact has vanished. So we should follow one single standard. One thing to be kept in mind is if the patient is dilated, the threshold values may be 1 or 2 decibels less than what we get in a normal patient. Now, here we have reliability indices, and these are the criteria. Like below these values, it can be considered as acceptable report. Some of the interesting features that we see, some of the patients, initially they are alert, and the points which are analyzed initially, like the four cardinal points, the patient has seen those points and given correct values, but after that he lost interest. And in these cases, we typically get a cloverleaf pattern. And these typically have high false negative errors. Just reverse of that, if the patient is trigger happy, then we make it high amount of false positive errors, and the report may show white scotomas. Normally, we have foveal threshold values given here. The machine gives light in the range of 0 decibel to 50, 0 being the brightest and 50 being the dimmest. In a normal patient, he is able to recognize light by around 30 to 36 decibels. If the patient's threshold values are low, that means there might be some problem in the foveal region. There are various statistical analyses available in the system. Most commonly used is CETA standard because it gives within around 5 to 6 minutes time a reasonable amount of data, which is enough for future comparisons. Now, coming to the raw data, these are the exact retinal sensitivity points, what exactly the patient has performed. Based on these points, the computer gives us a grayscale reading, which helps us in educating the patient regarding his problem. In neurological fields, it is quite helpful to know the exact altitudinal defect or if there's a vertical field defect. Now, this is the most important thing that we get in the perimetry report. The points which the patient has generated by doing the test, it is compared with the age-matched normals, and we get these values. These values give us an idea if the patient is having a generalized vision, decrease in vision, like say in case of refractive errors or cataract. The system then analyzes these particular values and gives us an idea if the patient has any localized field defect. So like these. In glaucoma, we know that there are areas of localized field defect which are important to us. And this, say in this report, we can see that these areas have localized field defect. This we get in the pattern deviation maps. Now coming to the glaucoma hemifield test, basically the system analyzes 5 areas of superior field with 5 areas of inferior field and gives us an idea whether the field is glaucomatous based on the criteria listed here. In global indices, we get a rough idea based on a single numerical value, whether the patient's field test is within acceptable range or it is subnormal. Coming to whatever we have discussed till now was based on Humphrey's visual field. Another device which is available to us is Octopus standard. We get most of the things in this Octopus printout is also similar to what we have in Humphreys. I would like to focus on this part. This is called Mebis curve, and in this there are 3 lines. So if the patient's values, whatever the digital sensitivity values has come, if it is within these 3 lines, based on the thick line graph that you have seen, then it is considered to be within the normal range. If the patient's retinal sensitivity values are lower, then it would fall out of these 3 lines and it would give us an idea that these points are abnormal. This is a particular feature of Octopus reading. Coming back to our Humphreys field, once we come to analysis, we should have the patients in front of us or the patient data in front of it, in form of the fundus photograph in front of us. We should analyze what exactly we are seeing here, whether the same thing is represented in the perimetry map or not, whether the values are exactly matching or not. This will also give us an idea of progression. If we have 3 or more readings of the patient or a perimetry of the patient, we can get a glaucoma.
Apologies to interrupt, sir, but the time is up.
Okay.
Can you wind up quickly, Dr. Kumar?
Yeah, you could just.
So we should be careful when you are evaluating the patient, so that we should have the picture in front of us, and exactly we should know what we are dealing with. All the cases may not be glaucoma.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Ravi Kumar. Next, we move on to Dr. Ankur Sinha. He is going to talk to us about avoiding errors in perimetry. Dr. Ankur, are you here?
Actually, if you may permit me, let me just summarize in 2 sentences the previous talk. Because there was a weigh-in range for HFA, basically the principles are almost the same. What we are measuring is the least amount of light is recorded through the visual field, and programs are the defined locations, like it can be a G1, and Dr. did not mention the 24-2C. Now the 24-2C actually gives you more central points. So these are the advantages, and basically the premises are exactly the same. I do have a few more, maybe we will take it up in the panel discussion.
Yeah, I think we are quite tight on time, so we will proceed to the next speaker. Dr. Ankur, please.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gauri Murthy.
Everybody to please stick to the time and please take the questions at the end of the session. Otherwise, we'll be running very late. Over to you, Ankur.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Gauri and everyone. Thank you, AIOS, for giving me this opportunity. And I'll be talking about how to avoid errors and perform a perfect perimetry. But I think I'll overshoot by another 50 seconds because I'm starting a little late by 50 seconds. The timer needs to be reset. Anyway, so we all know that we have seen how the visual fields are done. And then we talk about the minimum criteria of glaucomatous damage. The GHT has to be outside normal limits. A cluster of 3 non-edge points having a p-value of less than 0.5%, and one of them having a p-value of less than 1%, and a CPSD or a PSD less than 5%. Now, whenever these 3 criteria are met, we tend to think that it is glaucomatous. Now, look at this field. Now, we look at it, the GHT is outside normal limits. Then we have a cluster of more than 3 non-edge points having a p-value of less than 5%, and at least one of them having less than 1%, and PSD is definitely less than 5%. So as per this definition, is this glaucomatous? A youngster or maybe a young fresh pass out may think about that this is a glaucomatous visual field defect. Then we move on to the Haddock-Parish classification, and we can even try and classify this field as whether it is an early, moderate, or severe kind of a visual field defect. Now, mean deviation is less than -5, so it probably falls into a moderate kind of a visual field defect. Sorry, early kind of a visual field defect. There are 25 and 13 points, so probably it falls into a moderate kind of a visual field defect because of glaucoma. And there is no central point having a depressed value of less than 15 decibels, so it is definitely not severe. So looking at these fields, we would probably classify this as glaucomatous, maybe a mild to moderate kind of visual field defect. But what about when we look at the discs? The discs are absolutely normal. So we went ahead and classified the visual field defect, but the discs are absolutely normal. So we repeat the fields. The problem was because of a drooping of the lid, and lid taping was important. So check the palpebral opening and pupil size before doing the visual fields. Now, pitfalls can be in performing the test or in interpretation. Ophthalmologists should be smarter than the machine and at least smarter than the perimetrist. Look for the patient comfort. Explain the patient that it is a demanding procedure. It is based upon the attentiveness of the patients. It may need to be repeated. And it is not a test of their artistic, intellectual, or physical ability, and all the points are not seen by everyone. So this has to be very much clarified to the patient before we start that test. Check the position of the patient, whether it is correct or incorrect. Now, this is an incorrect position where chin is little away from the chin rest. Make the patient sit comfortably in the correct position. Check the position of lens. Say it is very far off from the patient's eye, so it is going to give you a ring scotoma. The correct position should be like this, as close possible to the eye. Check the centration of the patient. This is actually incorrect, where the eye is out of the center, and it should be absolutely in center to have these central points being tested absolutely in the center. Now, test speed of the patient can be, kind of variable. It can be varied. At least in the Humphreys, we can slow the test speed even when the test is in progress. So for very elderly patients and differently able patients, we may have to reduce the test speed. Check for the fixation target. Check, ask the patient to look at the yellow light in the center. But if there are other issues like a macular degeneration, or we're testing these other types of scotomas, then we have to ask the patient to look for a different kind of a fixation target. Appropriate lens power is to be used based upon the distance correction. Generous near addition should be given. Patient should not be using accommodation because it demands a lot of effort from the patient's size, and any cylinder more than one diopter cylinder should be placed in the proper position. Now, common artifacts. Now, there can be a rim artifact like this, as we have just discussed, if the lens is pretty away from the patient's eye. And if you explain the patient, put the lens in correct position, it goes away. Now, this is a patient who presented to us in 2007 with progressively increasing visual field defects. And we can clearly see that the mean deviation has increased from -4 to -12. PST has also increased from -2.7 to -7.8. And at the borderline, it has gone to outside the normal limits. And we can see that the visual field is definitely deteriorating. But he comes to us, we repeat the visual field, and what we find, the mean deviation has dropped from what it was in 2007, and it has dropped to which was similar kind of thing in 2005, 2006. Even the PST has improved a little bit. So the problem here was somebody had done a different, the left eye a program on the right eye visual field, and the cut and write the right here. So this is not the correct way. So what happens here is the software identifies the patient blind spot as pathological scotoma, and the software's blind spot is seen by the patient. The increase in median deviation was because of early cataract in this patient. Now, this is another case which is showing we have very high false positive, white scotoma kind of a patient. We have very high false positives in this case because of fixation losses. We explain the patient the procedure, and the patient does it wonderfully after explanation of this visual field defect. Now, this is a case of 45-year-old female with vague complaints of ocular discomfort. She has a strong family history of glaucoma. Mother and maternal grandmother has lost vision. She's hyperopic, but the angles are open with a narrow entry. The discs are absolutely healthy. We can have coupleless discs we had, and NRI was absolutely pink. And these were the visual field which was repeated again and again for her. We can see this is an unreliable visual field, these three of them. So we ordered this patient's visual field when they came to us. We had absolutely okay visual field, but what I was worried about was this generalized depression here. So I intrigued my perimeters at what they have done. They had put -3.5 in place of +3.5. When this refractive error was corrected, the fields absolutely went back to normal. Now, this is a patient, a 76-year-old diabetic old lady with a borderline IOP, and she suddenly presents with marked diminution of vision in one eye. And we see there's a gross visual field defect because the patient was a glaucoma patient follow-up. My perimeters with the visual field before I came. And this was the disc when I looked at the 90D. So I could see some hemorrhages here, which was not typical of glaucoma. Once we dilate them and see, it was a case of inferior temporal BRVO, which was seen as a visual field defect in this visual field. A 75-year-old lady with steroid-induced glaucoma and having ulcerative colitis, which is not controlled without steroids. And this is a visual field defect, visual fields on 30-2 and 10-2. Now, such advanced visual field defects can only be followed and visualized on the 10-2. Now, this patient is on regular follow-up since April 2010 with us. And we can see that she's maintaining almost similar kind of visual fields she's having since 2010 to 2020. When the patient is fatigued, inattentive, and losing interest after initial responses, what we get is something like a clover leaf here, where the central points are bright, but the later peripheral points are dark, which is something like a clover leaf. So this is another patient of ours. She comes to us with these kind of visual field defects, and we see that the GST is outside normal limits. There are more than 3 non-edge points having depressed value of less than 5 and 1 less than P value of 1. PSD is definitely more than 5%. And is this glaucomatous? So probably yes, it is glaucomatous. And once we classify as per the Haddock-Parish classification, she has 1 point which is showing less than 1 here. So probably she goes into moderate to severe kind of visual field defects based upon the Haddock-Parish classification. And this is the disc of the patient. We can clearly see there is an inferior disc hemorrhage here and a broad nerve fiber layer defect, which is causing this kind of visual field defect we just happen to see in this patient. This is the nerve fiber layer defect which is seen in these patients. And this is the GPA, which is showing you a rapid progression of disease from 10 to 2015, and she was advised surgery in this case. So this is the GPA again, which is showing you a significant slope. A 29-year-old female referred for glaucoma management, high CDRs, but the IOP was okay. So this is what somebody has written, that the patient is having glaucoma and she has been advised follow-up and investigations at us. And this is the visual field she was done at our place, because all the glaucoma patients are subjected to visual fields before I come. And this was the OCT when the patient had come to us. The OCT shows very large discs and abnormal nerve fiber layer. And this is the other visual field defect which I could see, which is not typical of glaucoma. And when we looked, this was the IOP, which was 22 and 24, which was recorded there, and she was started on anti-glaucoma medications. Synovirim T here started. So
I'm really sorry to interrupt, sir, but the time is up. If you could come to the conclusion slide, we would appreciate it.
Sir, I started 1 minute late. That's what I told you in the beginning.
No,
my program is actually timed for 8 minutes. It will finish in 8 minutes.
I'll do the 8 minutes, sir.
Yeah. So this is the fundus photograph, which is showing you the nerve fiber layer defects here and inferior thinning of NRR. But if you look at the disc very closely, you can find disc is grossly abnormal. And when you look at the other eye discs, you can clearly find out that the discs are absolutely abnormal. And this is a probably case of disc coloboma. So in the end, I would just say, to avoid pitfalls, choose the correct test protocol, explain the patient, and we treat the patients, not the fields. This is the most important thing we have to understand. Thank you for your
Thank you, Dr. Ankur. That was a nice talk on the pitfalls in perimetry. We now go on to OCT, which is another important way in which we assess damage in glaucoma. Dr. Sanjay Kumar Thakur will talk to us about OCT in glaucoma. Dr. Sanjay, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I hope I am visible. Is my screen visible?
No, sir. Please share your screen, sir.
Is my screen visible?
Now your screen is visible and you are audible.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the scientific committee, especially Dr. Amit Porwal, for inviting me to give this talk on role of OCT in the interpretation of and the diagnosis of glaucoma. As we all know, 40% of the ganglion cells must be damaged before we can pick up a visual field defect. So if we can have an imaging modality which can detect retinal nerve fiber layer at this stage, we can diagnose glaucoma much earlier. Optical coherence tomography plays an important role over here. It's a non-contact, non-invasive, high-resolution 3D imaging. It objectively quantifies the RNFL, optic nerve head, and the macular thickness. Time domain is obsolete. Our talk will be focusing on spectral domain OCT. Swab source is the future of the OCT. Primarily, we have 4 machines and 3 parameters which are to be examined. But we must remember that each machine has different glaucoma scan patterns and software segmentation algorithms. So we cannot compare the data of one machine with another. First of all, we should see the patient details, because over here, all the data are matched with the normative database and calculated accordingly. So all the statistical interpretations depend on that. Secondly, we must check the image quality by the signal strength, and each machine has its own acceptable criteria which must be adhered to. Thirdly, we must check the tomograms. There are 2 tomograms of the disc, one in the horizontal meridian and one in the vertical meridian. Over here, we should check for the Brooks membrane opening, which gives us the disc demarcation. The third tomogram is of the RNFL. Over here, we must check the segmentation, whether it has been done properly or not. As I said, signal strength varies from machine to machine. For Cirrus, we must have a minimum criteria of more than 6. For Spectralis, it should be more than 15. It is altered by different conditions like dry eye or cataract or other media opacities. Sometimes a drop of lubricant will not only improve the signal strength, but also give the improved RNFL thickness. Then we come to the RNFL thickness map. Typically shows an hourglass pattern of yellow and red colors over here. The warmer colors are thicker, and we have a color reference scale in microns on the left. Then we go on to the RNFL deviation map. Basically, it's an in-fast fundus image which gives the disk outline, the cup outline, and the calculation circle. It depicts the deviation from the normative database by color-coded superpixels. Then we move on to the table of disk and RNFL parameters, which are matched with normative database and color-coded. Then we examine the neuroretinal rim thickness and the RNFL thickness, which are given in TS and IT patterns. There are two lines. One is the continuous line, one is the hatch line for right eye and left eye respectively, and they are matched with normative database and color-coded. Then we move on to the sector and the quadrant map. They specify the location of the pathology. Small defects in the clock hour may be averaged in the sector maps. This is a printout of the other machine, Topcon over here and Spectralis over here. The Spectralis has an advantage that we can change the diameter of the calculation circle from 3.5 to 4.1 and 4.7. This helps us in bypassing any peripapillary pathology. The OCT determines the edge of the disc by the termination of the Brooks membrane, and then we draw a reference plane about 140 microns above this. In case of Cirrus, it varies from machine to machine, and area above this is the rim and below this is the cup. This is a printout from the Topcon machine giving the disk parameters. Every machine has its own segmentation protocols to analyze the ganglion cell complex. The Cirrus includes the IPL and the ganglion cell layer. The OptoView includes also the RNFL, but the Spectralis includes total macular thickness. The advantage is it avoids the major peripapillary pathologies. But the disadvantage is that there are a wide range of comorbid conditions which affect macula, giving us a high false positive. This is a Cirrus printout of the ganglion cell complex analysis. We have a thicker thickness acquisition map. The warmer colors are thicker, and we have a scale over here. Then we have the deviation map, the thickness table, and the sectoral thickness map, which are matched with the normative database and color coded. We should also see the horizontal and the vertical tomograms to see whether the segmentation has been done properly or not. Usually the defects seen on OCT are very well correlated with the visual field defects. Over here is an example of inferior RNFL defects seen on OCT, which is very well correlated with the superior visual field defect. With the ganglion cell complex coming into the picture, we can also correlate it very well with the visual field and the RNFL. And over here, this table shows how very well all the three are correlated in different stages of glaucoma. ZEISS has a proprietary software called Fulham, in which it integrates the structural OCT defects with the visual field printouts. Over here, we have the total deviation and the pattern deviation from the visual fields. We have a fundus photograph, and then we have a RNFL deviation map and a ganglion cell deviation map from the OCT, and then they are integrated into the structure function map. Then we have a table of the ONH and the RNFL parameters, which are matched with the normative database and color coded. One important reason for emphasizing this new modalities was that it will help us in detecting glaucoma at an early stage. So I will give a couple of examples over here. In this photograph, we can see there is diffuse neuroretinal rim thinning, but the visual fields are normal. And when we do the OCT, we can see that the extensive loss of RNFL is compatible with the disc damage seen. Another example showing a RNFL defect in the red-free photograph of the fundus, but the visual fields are normal. And when we do the OCT, it confirms the presence of RNFL thinning both on the thickness map and the deviation map, confirming glaucoma. So next we come to pearls and pitfalls. In our over enthusiasm for reading the OCT printouts, we sometimes reach a stage where we label the patient to be glaucomatous or normal depending on the red color or the green color seen in the printouts, thus giving rise to terminologies like red disease and green disease. But we should be very careful because there are many artifacts which may be patient determined like media opacities, or operator dependent like signal strength, or device dependent. Over here we see the blood vessels causing a shadowing on segmentation causing RNFL thinning. Over here we see a eyeball movement causing motion artifact, thereby we see the horizontal displacement of the images. Sometimes the floater, vitreous floaters come in the, or any other media opacity come in the area of the calculation circle, thereby the RNFL seems to be thinned out. But when we ask the patient to move the eyeball and it moves away from the calculation circle, the RNFL parameters become normal. Here is an example of a spectralist OCT printout showing RNFL thinning. But when we see the fundus, we see that this is a central chorioretinal scar, and this is toxoplasmosis and not glaucoma. Here's another printout from Cirrus showing a lot of RNFL thinning over here. And when we see the fundus, we see it's a myopic disc. In myopia, the supero-temporal and the inferotemporal arcuate bundles converge temporally. So though the height of the hump is normal, but because it is displaced laterally, so we see a lot of red areas. So this is myopia and not glaucoma. Here's an example. If we see carefully, the disc has not been placed centrally. And when we place the disc centrally, all the red areas disappear. So this is a centration error by the operator. Another printout from the spectralist, if we observe carefully, we see that the RNFL tomogram has not been placed in the center, so causing a lot of red areas. When we place it centrally, the red areas disappear. So this is another example of centration error by the operator. Another printout showing a lot of red areas. In fact, RNFL reaches 0, which is not theoretically possible. This is due to the segmentation error seen in the tomogram over here, seen in high myopia because of posterior staphyloma or peripapillary atrophy. So this is again not glaucoma. We should also remember that the normative database of each machine is very narrow. In case of Cirrus, it is restricted to 284 individuals of age range 18 to 84 years with refractive error -12 to +8 diopter. So any patient who is beyond this normative database will be flagged abnormal statistically, but this does not represent true disease, and we should be cautious in interpreting these OCT scans. OCT has another limitation of floor effect because the RNFL thickness cannot go below 40 microns because of presence of glial tissue and abnormal and blood vessels. So in advanced glaucoma, we have to rely on automated perimetry rather than OCT. Vice versa can also happen. Patient may be glaucomatous but may appear to be normal, so we should not go by OCT. And when we see the fundus photograph, the disc is glaucomatous, but because of the myelinated nerve fibers, the RNFL appears to be thickened. In fact, it appears wide, more than 95% of the normative database thickness. So it is called green disease. Then another important role of OCT is it helps us in deciding progression. So there is a software called guided progression analysis. For this, we need 2 baseline examinations and 3 follow-up examinations. So it gives us the RNFL thickness map, and then we have a deviation map in which we can see the deviation, how much it has progressed over the period of time. It also gives us graphs of average thickness of RNFL and the cup disc ratio over a period of time. This trend-based analysis also gives us the rate of change. And if this is statistically significant, then p-values are also given. TSNIT thickness graphs are superimposed of different examinations in this plot, and then it's color-coded to show how much it has progressed over a period of time. Like over here, we see a red area which has progressed over a period of time. The RNFL has thinned out. Then we have a table of the summary, which gives us whether it is a likely summary or a possible progression or a likely progression. With the ganglion cell complex coming into the picture, we now also have a provision for a Panto map in which we can see RNFL thickness and the ganglion cell thickness in one map. And over here is the baseline Panto map, and over here is the final Panto map, which shows how much it has progressed over a period of time. The progression areas are denoted by these asterisks. Over here, we can see the RNFL thickness map, the ganglion cell thickness map, and the visual field pattern deviation plots, which correlate with clinically. To summarize, OCT alone should not be used to make the diagnosis. An abnormality in OCT requires clinical correlation. Detecting progression can be challenging because of scans of different quality and age-related loss of RNFL. So machine cannot replace man. It is man plus machine. OCT angiography will play a very important role in future in helping us in the diagnosis of glaucoma. Thank you for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay. That was a very concise presentation. And I think we have a few seconds. All the talks are, quite good, and they're giving you an overview, but you have to go in detail. You'll have to obviously refer and then, use these technologies to know their pitfalls. Always remember that correlation of the clinical data is what is important. And that will help you to decide whether these investigations are to be taken or they are just an artifact of the testing. So the next stop is assessing glaucoma progression, why visual fields are the gold standard. So Dr. Shalini Mohan will be speaking to us about this. I think we can go on to that talk.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gauri. And I am thankful to AIOC and Dr. Amit, Dr. Partha for giving me this opportunity. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible. If you could also switch on your camera so we could put you in the spotlight.
I did not switch off my camera. Is my
Okay.
presentation visible?
Your presentation is visible. Please start.
Okay, thank you. So as we know that, oh, sorry. Just a second. So we know that this is the gold standard measurement for diagnosing glaucoma. Visual fields cannot be replaced by any other test in glaucoma armamentarium. We have additional tests. Just now we had a wonderful talk on OCT also, which can detect the RNFL parameters. But the important thing is that they provide only complementary information. They cannot substitute perimetry as a surrogate measure for visual field change because they tell us only about they don't tell us about the functional damage to our eye. Now, which is the most common method to judge progression? Whenever we see in clinical practices, what generally practitioners do is they keep the series of visual field one after another, and they tell the patient that, yes, probably you are progressing. So is this the right way to judge progression? Of course not. So it has been found that subjective judgment is still the most common method used, and it gives lots of inter-observer reliability, which is unsatisfactory. And therefore, all the data have been compiled in single overview printout, where the first two fields are being used as a baseline, and subsequently we can see that it has a grayscale, it has numeric data, it has total deviation plot, and it has pattern deviation plot. Besides, it also has reliability indices and global indices. So in this particular overview printout, we can see that mean deviation is progressing from minus 3.37 to 7.4 and then 8.61. We also can see the date which is being pasted here in the overview printout. But the important thing is that there is no statistical analysis and it cannot detect the rate of progression. Also, it cannot identify the fluctuation, whether the progression is a real progression or is it due to fluctuation. This was a very nice published study in an American journal, which gave us test and retest variability in glaucomatous visual fields. And they found that depressed points in generally depressed fields show more test-retest fluctuation than similarly depressed point in otherwise normal field. That means if field is more damaged, we will have more fluctuation. And therefore, we need to identify these fluctuations to differentiate them from real glaucoma progression. They also found that location of the points which are more central, the fluctuation is lesser. More are the peripheral points, more are the fluctuation. Now, clinical rate of progression is important to judge because normally also there is deterioration in the visual fields. So is it really due to glaucoma or is it due to aging process or some other process we need to identify? So to establish a valid progression, we need to have at least 6 visual field in first 2 years of life and thereafter twice per year. So this is the minimal requirement to judge the progression. So whenever we see progression, it is basically 2 types, event-based and trend-based. Now in event-based, this can be explained nicely with this chart. Now what we do is the 2 baseline visual field are averaged like this. So once they are averaged, they are compared with subsequent fields. And if we have depressed field in one of the fields after baseline visual field, it is given as an open triangle. If it is a half-closed triangle, that means the depression is seen in 2 consecutive fields after the baseline visual fields. And similarly, if they are depressed more than 3 times of p-value less than 0.05 in 3 consecutive fields, these are blocked triangles like this. So this was used in glaucoma GPA map by early manifest glaucoma trial also. And evidence suggests that this analysis have good agreement with expert opinion on progression. So here, this is the classical GPA printout where if we see this part of the GPA printout, this is basically the glaucoma change probability map, which is designed to identify progression events in consecutive visits at individual test point. So here we can see that whenever we have these kind of open triangles, that means they are depressed at one field, as just now I explained. Now, sometimes there are these crossed marks, which are the points which are too depressed to be measured or to assess progression. Now, another important thing is they also give you a message here of likelihood progression, which you can use for your clinical assessment in the patients. Now, this is the further part of the event-based analysis. If you can place as many fields as possible and here you can see the message of possible progression and likely progression. So, but the problem is that here we don't know what is the amount of the progression, what is the rate of the progression, we don't know. So that was taken care in trend-based analysis. Now, this is the process in which all the visual field are analyzed. It is a kind of linear regression to assess the rate and significance of progression over the changing time. Now, it can be done by VFI or mean deviation, but it is important to assess by VFI because it is calculated from pattern deviation plot. It ranges from 0 to 100, 0 being perimetrically blind, and it assesses the amount of remaining visual field, and because it is not affected by generalized depression, so effect of cataract, etc. cannot modify the visual fields. Moreover, central points are given more weightage in BFI. So whenever we see this part of the visual GPA printout, we know that this is assessed by visual field index and it is being plotted between duration and visual field index. Now, the first two visual fields are the baseline visual field, and then we can see this slope, which is the regression line, and subsequent visual fields can be seen as these black dots or black squares in this part of the printout. The important thing is that it can assess the rate of progression, and if it is significant, it again gives a p-value to it. Now, here we can see these are two trend analysis for the patient. The first part gives the progression rate of 1.14, and this is being plotted by VFI. The other part, which is being plotted below down, is plotted against mean deviation. And here we can see that progression is seen 3.04% loss per year. So we can see there is more progression on mean deviation because of increased cataract of the patient. So VFI is more reliable in glaucoma patients. So it is important to assess the rate of progression because it allows timely application of therapeutic measures to prevent visual function and visual disability. It is also important to discriminate between fast and slow progressors because suppose there is a young individual who is fast progressive, we need to be more aggressive in our treatment. Similarly, if we have an older individual who is slow progressor, we can be less aggressive in his management. So it is important to assess the rate of progression. So what is the main difference between event and trend-based analysis? Now, the event-based analysis, they require lesser visual fields. They require less time to produce definitive results. So we can detect rapid deterioration in visual fields more quickly than trend analysis. But trend analysis has its own importance, as I said, because it actually estimates the rate of visual field progression and has got higher diagnostic sensitivity. And you know that what is happening throughout the time period of the patient's disease. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much for finishing it in time. Can I request the chairpersons to please call our next speaker?
Yeah, the next talk is a debate. So abnormal OCT with normal fields, treatment versus no treatment. Dr. Nagalakshmi Ganesh will be speaking for treatment. Dr. Nagalakshmi.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Please go ahead.
Audible?
Yes, you are audible. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Good afternoon to the esteemed panelists and other participants. So I will be talking for treatment when there's an abnormal OCT with normal fields. The current glaucoma definitions have largely become pre-perimetric for a reason. The most important one because about 20 to 40% RGCs are lost before the onset of visual field defects on standard automated perimetry, as supported by a large number of studies. So the debate in question, abnormal OCT and normal fields, essentially implies pre-perimetric disease. That is the presence of characteristic glaucomatous changes in optic disc and RNFL without the presence of visual field defects detectable on SAP. So in the diagnostic armamentarium of pre-perimetric glaucoma, we know that the structural tests have always stood the test of time. And among them, OCT has the following advantages. The main one being that it gives us a wide range of information. The average circumpapillary RNFL thickness and inferior sector RNFL thickness is found to be most extensively studied and gives us the best diagnostic accuracy, differentiating normal from glaucomatous eyes, especially in early stages. And also the average thickness parameters detects glaucomatous damage at 95% specificity. There is always something new and robust in the evolution of OCT, which helps us in circumventing the present limitations. So talking about how OCT is reliable in pre-perimetric disease, I would like to talk about the advanced image glaucoma study, where about 377 eyes with pre-perimetric glaucoma were followed up for about 9 years. It was found that the measurable abnormalities primarily happened in structure up till a tipping point, and then it was structure and function, and then it became purely functional. So the ganglion cell complex and focal loss volume was the best predictor of VF conversion in this group, and 82% of them were preceded by abnormal OCT. And the time lag was found to be about 24 months between an abnormal OCT and VF conversion. Other studies like VIX also support that in pre-perimetric disease, there was a 26-fold increased risk of progression into perimetric disease when there was structural progression. OCTA has also been largely studied, and its role in pre-perimetric glaucoma is also quite robust, especially the flow index and vessel density was found to be significantly lower in the pre-perimetric groups. Now that we are convinced OCT does pick up pre-perimetric disease, why should we treat? So this is going to be based on Koyenkin et al.'s study, where about 127 pre-perimetric eyes were studied for about 5 years, and 56.57% of them were classified as progressors. Among the various variables, optic disc hemorrhage and percentage reduction in IOP was found to be having a positive association in both the structural progresses as well as the functional progresses. And a mean deviation of about -0.66 plus or minus 0.6 decibel per year progression was noted. So considering this, it takes only about 15 years for the progressors to develop advanced disease. So this supports the importance of adequately lowering IOP even in the pre-perimetric stage. Also, our landmark studies have always shown that progression was higher in untreated group when compared to the treated group. EMGT in fact goes on to say that about 12 to 13% average increase in progression happens per millimeter increase in mercury. So putting all this in clinical perspective, if you talk about a 43-year-old gentleman who came to our OPD with about a baseline of about 22 millimeters of mercury and pre-perimetric disease, he was lost to follow up, and he came back in about 2.5 years later with a perimetric disease with paracentral as well as nasal defects. So considering that in another 15 years he will develop advanced disease, he'll be only 58. So starting treatment early is very important. So to conclude, OCT provides objective evidence of ONH damage. One has to ensure reliability and rule out artifacts. Clinical correlation and risk assessment is very important before deciding on treatment, and we have to know how much of change is significant when looking for progression. And yes, do not hesitate to treat if OCT is abnormal, even if the fields are normal, to save sight years, as damage occurred once is irreversible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nagalakshmi. And Dr. Vani Puri, are you here? She will be speaking against the treatment. Dr. Vani?
I think Dr. Vani is not logged in and she's not picking up the phone.
Okay.
Dr. Vani, are you there? I couldn't trace her in the chat box also. I think we have that much time can be utilized for discussion.
Yeah. So if I
And the
could quickly,
discussion, if you can, somebody can just sum it up, the discussion.
yeah, if I could quickly give some against points, like we would not make a blanket statement in the first case that you always treat or always do not treat. One should be aware that the OCT printouts, as Dr. Sanjay showed in his presentation, they can produce a lot of artifacts because of improper imaging or because of the nature of the optic nerve head itself. So just a red on the OCT scan or imaging does not mean that this person is going on to develop glaucoma. You have to put it in the context, in the clinical context, and then decide whether you treat or don't treat, and look at the patient as a whole. Treat the patient and not just the IOP or the disc or the fields or the OCT. So the entire patient has to be taken into consideration. And always the imaging technology should be understood and their pitfalls should be understood, and only then should you take their results at face value. So we'll start discussing about visual fields and OCT in the remaining time that are there. Are there any questions from the audience, Dr. Amit? Is there anything from the audience which we need to address?
No questions. You can utilize this time for
Dr.
discussion.
Gauri.
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Gauri,
Yes,
can I
Dr.
take?
Das.
Yes,
Please.
can I take 2 minutes?
Yeah.
So this is very interesting, that whether the pre-perimetric glaucoma, about the pre-perimetric glaucoma, it is still a controversial subject, because what constitutes progression has yet to be decided. So nobody knows what is actually progression or not. So that has not been, different people have set different criteria for the progression. So it has undecided that what constitutes progression. Second aspect, what constitutes the structural damage in the macular area. One machine shows the damage, the second machine may not show any damage. So we are not very sure that actually there is damage in the macular area or not. So thirdly, the machine changes so fast. Every 5 years, you see a new machine with a new modality. So we do not know actually structural damage is really occurring in one machine. It is not occurring in the other machines. So it is still debated. But on your clinical examination and most of it on the field examination and the progression of the field, I think will give more importance to the field changes rather than the OCT changes in the macular area. Right? I think that way he has progression. Desalini has really very clearly explained what constitutes progression, and we must depend on more of a field changes rather than the OCT changes, right?
Okay. Dr. Das, your point is well taken, but may I add that the person behind the machine or the person interpreting the machine is very important. So
yes,
one should, none of these investigations are useless in inverted commas. They're all of use, and it is the way you use it which makes the difference. Put everything together. Don't view any investigation in isolation. Dr. Rangraj, I think you wanted to say something, sir. Please.
See, when we talk about progression, European Glaucoma Society clearly tells you that the gold standard is visual field, and OCT only does a complementary job. Now, there was some controversy about what to do with swap. Today, the gold standard of follow-up is to look at the linear regression and to have short strategy and accurate programs. For example, nobody has mentioned the HFA 24-2C, for example. That tests a lot of central points. So you not only test the central point, it's the location. See, when we talk about a program, it is where you test, and strategy is how you test. So that's why the subtle difference is. So when we look at all this, you never make a diagnosis with glaucoma. You make a diagnosis based upon the totality of the defect. So that is why we have the cost, which gives you statistical analysis. For example, at 0.5, percent of population is normal and things like that. So the gold standard still continues to be the SAP, that is static automated perimetry, white on white, not swap. Swap, I don't think I would put anybody on swap. I would do short programs and smart places to test. That's what I would do. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Rangraj, thanks for that comment. So one important thing is testing should be aligned with what you're trying to check. So if you have a very small RNFL defect, which is very much near the horizontal meridian, your 30-2 or 24-2 may not show the defect, a 10-2 may show the defect. So you need to align the testing program to the clinical context. So I think all the speakers have done a good job of illustrating what a particular technology can do or
Thank
cannot
you.
do. It is up to us to use it in an appropriate way. I would thank
I
the
request the
AIOS.
session officials to please conclude.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.